Hey folks, it's Bear Gardener, and it's time to drop the last part of my thoughts on the card reveals. So at this point, we will have the new Blood and Iron expansion literally just around the corner, and we will have seen spoilers for so many cards that it's hard to keep track of, but you can find all of that in the link down below. There is a playlist that has all of my coverage for Blood and Iron and the various previews and cards we've got, and we'll have everything else involved in it. This is going to be the fourth and last part of my coverage of the card reveals. There's a bunch of other stuff in there too. As ever, I'm a Kards Content Creator, member of the Kards Contributor Program, new player advocate, kind of okay at the game, really. I make a lot of content, do a lot of streaming. You can follow me, all the links in the doobly-doo down below. If you feel the urge, please like, follow, subscribe, follow me on Twitch, drop me a Twitch sub, or hit the donate link down below if you're willing to throw a little bit of money at the thing. Genuinely, I can't emphasize enough that every little bit helps just to keep the technology in place for me to actually be able to do this. But it's not a requirement, I'm always here. No reason I'm going anywhere yet, it's just in the long term. Financial issues are financial issues. Anyway, never want to make a big deal of that. The focus is going to be on the cards. As usual, we're going to go nation by nation, main nations first, alphabetically, talking about the cards. I will say, depending on how this video gets edited together, there might be a couple of bits that are out of place or not quite in perfect alphabetical order. Please forgive me, I have been very busy in the run-up week. But I will do my best to keep this clean and efficient. So, also, if you see me, in slightly different clothes or a change of, general background or anything, don't panic, don't adjust your sets. It is the fact that I may well have recorded this in chunks. Because it's been very busy around where I am. There's a lot goes on when we get a release like this, and it's always very exciting. So, anyway, on to the cards. As I said, alphabetically by nation, so we're starting with Britain, and this is Creeping Barrage. And this is an interesting card. This is a fascinating special card given where Britain is going at the minute. So we have started to see the garrison token drop mechanic and an awful lot of tools that punish your opponent for not being able to target or attack specific units. Britain's always had interesting pin options. Naval superiority, which is pin a unit and gain some HQ defense. There's also pin a unit and draw a card. We now have, at 3 cost, pin a target unit. When the pin is removed, retreat it. Now this is interesting because we have not seen this before. I have not come across before a design space like this, and honestly I quite like it, but I know a lot of people aren't going to. So let's kind of break down what I like about the design of this. The design of this is very, very thematic for the use of artillery and barrage warfare to control the field, and it fits with the new theme that Britain has of trying to have board presence and then use control to keep that board presence, which punishes your opponent. It's an interesting direction to go in. I'm probably going to do a whole thing on the individual nations and their stuff. That's not for here, but it does have the potential to be a bit, not necessarily too strong, but frustrating to play against. It may not be the most fun deck to run into, but I suspect you're going to run into it, because certain old-school Magic Blue players, like myself, kind of going to love this stuff. It's 3 cost, so it's not cheap, but the effect is very good. So obviously the pin is the pin, it's taking care of your target for a turn. I say a turn, this doesn't account for having an ally like Japan, for example, that could make this pin last for an extra turn. Then, once the pin goes, you're retreating it, so the tempo gain from this card could be huge. As ever, the big question is always going to be the same, or rather questions are always going to be the same. The first of which is it too expensive? Can you afford to play it? And the second is, are you going to have deck space to run 1 or 2 of these? I think you're probably going to try. I think there are a number of archetypes that like this. This is not just good for the new kind of board punishing units archetype. This is also pretty fun for commandos. Yeah, I like the design of this. How much it actually is good, we'll wait to see. But on the face of it, this is very good value. Because you get the retreat, in effect, you really are punishing your opponent. So, say for example, your opponent has a big, heavy tank that they've managed to deploy and bring forward with its, I don't know, 2 or 3 op cost. And they get 1 swing out of it, so they've invested whatever the cost of the tank was, call it 6, then the 3 op cost twice is 12 to make the swing. Then you pay 3, pin it, push it back. So not only have you cleared it from the front line when the pin ends, but you also then make them pay the op cost all over again. So there is a tempo edge to this. This is very much a tempo card, and I'm always a fan of those. I think they can be pivotal if played well, but we'll see. I don't know whether it's going to be like meta-defining, but it's certainly interesting design space, and I kind of like the way that it simulates the way that Barrage Warfare was used, which is always interesting to me, and I imagine will be of interest to anyone else who has an interest in warfare tactics and or the deployment and use of artillery. Anyway, next card. The next card is also British. This is Kangaroo Transport, and I love the art on this card, I love the name of this card. Whether people are going to love this card or hate this card is a very different question. So this is an interesting order. So this order is very cheap at 1, and it is give a British infantry blitz and +1 heavy armour. It counts as a tank. So this is effectively, if you're not familiar with what this is referring to, this is referring to the rapid conversion of units to armoured function by like throwing units into armoured transports and similar to give them speed and response. And I love the thematics of this. So depending on the unit you're putting down and its operation cost, this does not suck. In particular, I think this is aimed at the idea that you will put this on a strong guard. A pretty good example of this would be the Glamour Boys. If you have the credits and you can drop the Glamour Boys, drop this on them and push them to the front line, they become a big guard body that also has heavy armour, and for the purposes of other effects, they count as a tank. Now, how much that will be relevant obviously depends on what cards you're running that are relevant and necessary as tanks. It could be quite niche if you're doing something with combined arms. Maybe we're going to see something from Britain that will particularly interact with tanks, because that is the theme of the expansion, so it wouldn't be a shock. What I will say is that the downside with this, of course, is that 1 cost can be quite big, because it's the cost of the unit plus the operation cost to move the unit, plus the cost of Kangaroo transport to do it, and the card space in the deck. I honestly don't know whether this will end up being a card that is played because it can give you frontline presence at cost, or whether it is just going to be one of those cards which in theory is good on principle, but the problem is it just, at the upper end of play, doesn't justify the slot in your deck, because a card in your deck is a significant thing when you have only 39 cards in your deck. So I don't know about this card. I am kind of sad that I'm not just super enthusing about this card, because I am a lover of Britain. I've been saying endlessly that I want to see Britain do something other than just air or HQ defense gain. But now that we're seeing different tools and stuff, that's really cool, but this needs something that it synergizes with really, really well for it to really work. But in principle, it's a good idea. I just don't know whether it's going to be worth the cost. This is good, definitely for me, is going to be a time will tell card. Right, this is Slashers, and we are back to the garrison-focused cards. And in a big way. So Garrison is a special, and I've said many, many times that specials tend to be cards that are almost archetype enabling or archetype centralizing. In the case of Slashers, I'd say that's definitely true. So Slashers is a good guard. 2/7 guard, not bad. Fury, kind of nice. We already like Blackwatch, but Blackwatch has an amazing passive effect. So how good's Slasher's passive effect? Well, when a friendly unit survives combat, add a garrison unit to your support line. Let me be clear. Played at the right time, in a deck that is able to take advantage of it and has some space in the support line and has got their guards into a good position, especially if they can get guards and or tanks into the front line, Royal West Kent, we're looking at you as an enabler, this card is bonkers. This card is utterly, utterly bonkers. Because in and of itself, it is a great body, which is an unbelievably strong target for naval support or synthetic rubber. Really think about synthetic rubber on this thing. But also, that passive text, spamming out garrison units. Now, garrison will appear so that you get the reminder of what it does, but basically it's a 0/3 guard that then, if it's still around at the start of your turn and your opponent hasn't attacked it, deals a point of damage to your HQ. Spamming more of those out while these are in a position to protect the front line. So the whole purpose of this is going to be to, in one way or another, control the board. Whether that is to get things into the front line and clog it up, use the Black Prince, the new tank that limits frontline access to only 2 cards, or just pin the life out of your opponent. This, you want somewhere on the board where things are taking attack. Honestly, part of you just wants this taking the attacks, because if you can get this into the front line, not only does the thing absorb some attacks, but it represents an unbelievably potent threat if you can find a way to buff it, and as I say, Britain is not short of a way to turn on defense into offense. You have naval support. Is it naval support? I think is the card, the one that you're probably getting off of Coldstreamers. Sorry, other Coldstream guards. Bad habit. You've also got synthetic rubber, and you've also got Rule Britannia, which is a card which is probably going to see play in such a guards heavy deck. But anyway, and of course you've got Royal West Kent, which is the thing that, while it exists, gives all of your guards +2 attack and blitz, which makes this a 4/7 Fury. Genuinely, if you can get it working, this is going to be an integral part of a way of making this deck potent. Again, it does suffer from being a bit slow. And I think that is going to be the one big controlling factor in this crazy new British archetype. But that's for another video to talk about that and the effect of it. But on the whole, Slashers is a very strong card, and I'm really interested to see people playing around with it. Okay, let's talk about the Rangers. So this is a British elite and is probably going to provoke some discussion. So the Rangers is another Fury unit for Britain. Definitely a thing that we're seeing more of. I'll probably talk about that when I talk about the general summary of things in another video. But this one it looks like guard stats but doesn't have guard. However, it has a very particular card text. So the Rangers says, increase the non-combat, non-attack damage dealt by your units by 1. Right, non-combat, non-attack damage, especially for those who haven't been particularly playing through certain things recently. This is going to, in Britain's case, be very specific to, obviously, commandos. Number 10 commando will pop up. And also to the new garrison unit and its friends, like the Cheshire Regiment. This card is very strong. This card is really, really strong, but it is an elite, and I will remind people before we all kind of cross the Rubicon in some crazed frenzy of this is incredibly overpowered. This is effectively a pinnacle elite for an archetype, and like all the big pinnacle elites, it has a huge effect, but in the end it is just a must answer. You can suppress it, you can remove it, you can do all sorts of things to counter it, but while it's on the board it's very, very bad. Commandos decks are going to love this card. This is right up there with Long Range Desert Group for just insane things you can do with commandos. And particularly with the buff to Commando Raid, this will be very popular with commandos. But also, obviously, this synergizes with Garrison and all the Garrison spawning cards. So something to be aware of, but in my opinion, not nearly as broken as it looks at first glance. Just potentially very broken if you can get it down and keep it alive. The key is you have to get it down and keep it alive. Now, I will say, on the more broken side, you have to keep it alive that long if you build the right board, because man, this'll sting. If every garrison unit that's on the board is doing 2 damage to your opponent's HQ, that's very bad. So, this is incredibly strong. Definitely expect to see this play. Like, legitimately, this is probably going to get slapped in a bunch of Garrison and Commando decks that are going to get tried out. I'm certainly going to be one of the people doing it, I'm not going to lie. And it is definitely going to be quite strong. There are fringe connections here. In particular, our old friend, the Shibata Regiment, synergizes with this card. Just should you ever be running a Britain-Japan deck that has some reason to want Shibata on the board and stuff like that, which you might well want to try at some point. This does in fact synergize with Shibata, increasing Shibata's damage by 1. Just a thought. Overall, ow. Right, it's the 110 Panzergrenadiers. This is a German elite. This is a big card for the 4 or more attack deck. This says your ground units with 4 or more attack deal +3 damage. So, first things first, this counts itself. So this is in effect an 8/5. Just with Blitz. Just saying. And this is obviously a huge effect. This is perma-blitzkrieg on all of your 4 attack or more units. This is immense. This is incredibly powerful. This is absolutely the capstone of a deck built around this archetype and this idea of 4 or more attack. But also, this is just really good in any German deck that goes late game and ends up with 4 or more attack units, and that's not that uncommon if you go look at the card pool. Legitimately, this is just an incredibly strong card. This card is almost certainly going to get slapped into an awful lot of decks, because as long as you have a few goody ground units to trigger this, I do like the fact that it is ground units only. It would be utterly insane if it targeted, for example, aircraft, but I will say, not for nothing, artillery are ground units. Now, having an artillery with 4 or more attack is not easy, but if you find a way to pull it off, that suddenly becomes 7. 7 cost, reach that ignores everything. Anyway, there's a meme in there somewhere. I might actually try and build it. But on a more serious note, this is just a very strong card, which is probably going to get thrown into a lot of decks. I definitely think it's going to see play. Blitzkrieg with a body, just in and of itself, doesn't suck. Now, granted, this is more situational because you have to have 4 or more attack. But as I say, like any Panzer 35T that you drop from 20 Panzergrenadier fits this, 7 Schutzen fits this. Obviously, a lot of the new units that are dropping fit this. There are tanks that you drop from Blitz Doctrine all fit this. It is not hard for Germany to find targets for this card. It's pretty cool. Also, it's not a deployment effect, which means that it's permanently in effect, so if you drop something from hand, it gets the benefit too. Overall, this is a very strong card. Expect to see a chunk of it. Blood and Iron tank aficionados, let me introduce you to the Panzer 3J Late. This is a new German special tank, and it's another veteran unit. So this card is just a straight up value. These are about standard value, frankly. 4 cost, 2 op cost, 4/4 blitz tank. Yep, that's pretty much what you'd expect. Becomes veteran when the enemy HQ has taken 4 or more damage. When it's veteran, its operation cost drops to 0 and it gets shock. So this is pretty interesting, but I don't know how actually good it is. So join me on a journey, if you will, into how this actually looks in play. So we want to play this, which is nice. We'd like to trade with it at least once because we're going to heal up. That means we're playing this turn 6. But before it can do its thing, we then need to find a way to deal the damage to the enemy HQ. So we also need something on board that we can operate that can do 4 damage to the enemy HQ. So this is we suddenly start to see this as being much more of a late game card than a mid-range card. You can play this as a sort of mid-rangey drop, but it's very slow because it's op cost 2. And the veteran effect goes in. However, of course, when the veteran effect goes off, it gets shock, which is not nothing, and heals itself. But how much is a 4/4 tank with shock going to make a difference by the time this is triggered? That's a different question. However, because I have to round out the argument, and I attempt to be as wide as I can in my assessment of these cards, we have to bear in mind that there is Reichsbank and ramp are a thing. So this thing can hit the board quite early. Also, you can get this, of course, off Blitz Doctrine. Though, if you've also got Contest Doctrine down, this becomes somewhat less good because then the veteran loses the bonus. But anyway, there's some interesting stuff going on here. I like the card. I like the card's design. I think it's solid. I just don't think it's earth-breaking. And I think it's going to have to work very hard to contest its way into a lot of German mid-range decks, because Germany is not lacking for big, solid tools. Overall, though, I do quite like it. Plus, the art is quite funky. I kind of like the mountains in the background, but honestly, we'll see. This is another one of those cards I'm putting on my wait-and-see list to see. Honestly, with a lot of Germany, but again, not for this video. But yeah, it's interesting, and it is potent. Like a 0 op cost shock tank with 4 attack is not nothing. So there is definite value here, but you really do need to get the veteran on it, and that might be a longer walk than you want to take to get to your destination. Okay, this is Run the Battlefield. This is a German order. This is another fundamental part of this new 4 or more attack archetype. This one says, for each of you, it's 4 cost, I should say. For each of your units with 4 or more attack, randomly gain 3 credits, give a unit +2/+2, or draw a card. So what this will do is it will look on your board, and unit by unit, it will pick your 4 attack units. Each one will then effectively make a roll with a 1/3 chance of either giving you 3 credits, gaining +2/+2, or drawing a card. So, things I like about this. I like the concept. The idea that you are leveraging having a big, powerful board, and instead of playing a heavy turn where you're deploying more resources onto the board, you are enhancing or gaining advantage from the resources on the board. Things I don't like about this card. I do not like the RNG of this card. I'm not saying this card isn't good. I'm not saying this card isn't probably going to see play. That people are going to try this new archetype, and this card has the potential to be nuts. But also this card has the potential to be totally pointless, because you don't know what you're getting, and it's not cheap. got a 4-cost order, and you want a 4-cost order to be impactful, which this definitely is, but the problem is you also want it, or at least I want it. Maybe you're not that person. Maybe there are players out there. If you are that player that is looking at this and going, whoop, I love this, I love the randomness of this, this is my ride or die, amazing, I get a big swing turn and then have to adapt player, let me know, but I want consistency. If I'm playing a 4-cost order late in the game, because this is not a card I'm playing on turn 4, this is a card that I'm playing late in the game. It's a card I'm playing late in the game after I have developed a heavy board. I'm quite possibly playing it on a Reichsbank turn, or just on turn 10 or 11, where I've got a big board and lots of units on it, and I want to know that the card I'm playing will give me a consistent and reliable advantage in winning the game. This gives me the potential advantage in winning the game, but it's random, and I don't like the randomness. That's me. I'm not a fan. Many people will know this, especially if you followed my views on Retribution when the mechanic came out, and the whole develop mechanic and all of the stuff that goes with it. At least then you're choosing the card. This, I really don't know. Like, to me, this is a card that I would shy away from playing. I'm probably going to experiment with it because I kind of feel like I have to test everything, but my instinct is not to like this card. I don't like the randomness. I don't like the costing on it. I don't like the fact that it's so swingy. But hey, if it works, it works. We'll see. I could be completely wrong. This could become an absolutely central card and everybody could love it. I mean, credit acceleration's huge at the moment, and frankly, the fact that this can give you, at least has a 33% chance of 33 1/3. Yet, don't at me. I know how percentages work. But you have a 1/3 chance of this actually giving you good credit acceleration for each unit of 4 cost on the board. And there's the thing. It's the compound randomness. If I've got 3 units on the board that all have 4 or more attack, depending on the situation I'm in, I kind of want to be able to choose what this does, because there are times at which I don't want to just draw 3 cards. But we shall see. Anyway, it's an interesting card, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so this is the 388th Independent Regiment for Japan. And this is one of the cards that is part of the new Japan sub-theme, which is really good cards very cheaply that have a downside. This one is a fundamental card. It is a very, very good body. 5 cost for a 6/4 with blitz and 0 operation cost is insane. That's so good it hurts. But of course, it has destruction. The enemy draws a card. So once the enemy deals with this, they get to draw a card. But, I mean, honestly, do you care? I don't know that I do. This, I mean, again, so this is probably not going to leap into every Japan deck. But if you want to run a slightly heavier, aggressive Japan deck that really wants to just put threat on the board, like turn 5... putting a 6/4 in the front line, or trading with a 6/4, is not nothing. This is, do not sleep on how strong this card can be. This is a very good mid-range card. Even though it may feel like with 0 op cost and blitz, it's supposed to lean super aggro, and it could be used as an aggro tool, and it probably will. But it's not a tank, so it's not instant swing, but it's a hell of a body. I really like the design of this. I like this concept in Japan of the gamble of getting early advantage, but maybe suffering later. But, I mean, honestly, I don't know how much you care about the enemy drawing a card. I mean, card draw matters, but you've got a 6/4 on the board. You can probably deal with what they're drawing. Honestly, I quite like this, and I certainly think this is a card that I will be recommending to newer players to make use of on their initial climb, because value is a thing. Oh, and it goes without saying, this is an unbelievably good card in draft. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so this is Cedar Division. This is A really interesting card. So, Cedar Division is a very, very odd duck, in my opinion, but quite possibly useful one. This is at 6 cost and 0 op cost, 4/4 blitz and shock, kind of okay. I say kind of okay because the stats are alright, but for 6, I'd kind of like more. However, it also has veteran, so it becomes veteran if you have 4 or less credit slots. So, we'll get to that in a minute, because maths is the thing. However, what does this look like as a veteran? Well, as a veteran, this is bonkers. Okay, so Cedar Division is an 8/8 with blitz and shock, and it says draw 2 additional cards if your hand is empty at the start of your turn. So this leans into it's kind of similar, I suppose, in some ways to the old Feigned Retreat, in the way that it's giving you hand refill for empty hand. Anyway, this goes in a very specific direction. You want to get this on the board, you want to get this to veteran, and then you want to just keep spamming cards out of your hand at 100 miles an hour. What kind of deck archetype can actually lose credit slots and then start spamming cards out of the... Oh, wait. There we go. So, it's obviously, this card is going to be aimed at self-credit denial. And it's a very interesting self-credit denial tool, but it's also a very awkward self-credit denial tool, because this is something you want to hit off one roof. Bear with me. You want to get to the point whereby you have 4 or less credit slots, ideally, before you drop this card, so that it insti-veterans. But that's really difficult to do, because obviously 6 cost, but that's less difficult to do when you account for 1 roof. So if you have a 1 roof pop-off turn, and you gain a pile of credits, drop one of these at 6 cost, obviously 1 roof is 5 cost, so you have got 4 or more credit slots at the moment, but then you drop, say, Pete, or something that gives you the buffs, then you start self-credit denying yourself back down again by removing stuff, then this thing procs and becomes veteran, and at the end of it, you end up with a completely empty hand, an 8/8 veteran unit with blitz and shock on the board, plus whatever else you've got, and it's probably bigger than 8/8 because you've hit it with Pete. So this is a very, very potentially strong tool in the way that you throw down what is effectively the self-credit denial pop turn. But self-credit denial is a complex beast, and not the world's most popular one, because there are some people who love it. I am one of them. There are some people who hate it. One of my best friends is one of them, because they just don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to deal with the ridiculous sequencing and maths and planning, and then timing your pop-off turn and making sure that the statistical chances that you're actually going to draw the correct number of 1 roofs, and is it better in this particular circumstance, depending on your credit slots and the board position, for you to have 1 roof in hand before you pop once or twice? And how many times do you want to avail land and seed, and what do you want the targets to be, and then what's the draw percentage based on what's left in your deck, followed by... And you're probably seeing where some people don't like this archetype. I love it. I think it's so much fun. But I don't know how much it's going to be a big thing. But this card does fit right into it. This card has the potential to be really, really good in SKD. But anyway, that's kind of my opinions on Cedar Division. I'm probably more enthusiastic about than some other people will be. There will be people who, like me, are enthusiastic about this. There will be people who are like, it's an SKD tool, I'm just going to ignore it. But yeah, I actually like this. I like dropping just a little nod to SKD, which has seen some nerfs, needed nerfs, by the way. Throwing a little kind of extra to SKD players in this expansion makes me personally quite happy. I'll be playing with this, but I don't know how many other people will. Anyway, just my thoughts. I could be proved wrong, but currently that's where I stand on Cedar Division. Right, this is the 77th Regiment. So this is a pretty vanilla stat line on a special card. It's 2/4 with blitz and shock. So far so indifferent. However, in text time, as is the theme of this expansion, we're getting lots of interesting card texts. This one has, after this unit shock attacks, add a 20th Infantry Regiment to your support line. So, okay. Many of you are now going, what? Yeah, where do I... It's here. I will pop it up for you. The 20th Infantry is the very, very much not really played 1-cost 2/2 guard standard that Japan has. I really don't know what this is trying to do. I really don't. I'm not sure I fully understand. This is a weird Japan card to me, because this is in effect quite defensive. I'm kind of underwhelmed. I have been proven wrong when I've been underwhelmed before, but I really am kind of underwhelmed by this card. Like, it's a nice effect, but this thing shock attacks once, which means you're going to get a single 20th Infantry. 2/2 guard. Woot. And then this thing will carry on just doing its thing, so on. It does 2 attack. And you need a way to buff this or reshock this and do other things with it. So I don't know. I think, if anything, there will be a way to like throw this into some kind of combo that does something interesting. But on the whole, I'm really quite underwhelmed by this. I'm not convinced this card is particularly strong. Just interesting. I don't mind interesting, but I wait to be proven wrong, but I have as yet to light upon an idea that makes me go, oh, that's how this can be really, really busted. Mostly it's just a unit that can make a single 2-point attack and then generate an extra unit, which is not terrible, but is it really special worthy? This is exhaust all options. I really don't like this card. I'm not saying this card isn't good. I'm not saying this card isn't potentially cracked. I just... I don't like this card, and I will explain why. Okay, so exhaust all options is an elite card, so you expect it to be kinda nuts. This card is pin target unit and adjacent units. So, okay, it's a 4-cost Monty, so it better do something good. 4-cost new Monty. It really does. Pin units deployed and added by the enemy next turn. Right. So, this is crazy. And this is crazy because of the existence of a card called Forced Surrender, which is probably about to appear down there. The potential to use cards like this to utterly kill tempo on your opponent is big. Pin can be incredibly effective if used well. Getting an AoE pin and then auto-pinning everything your opponent deploys next turn, also known as completely invalidating your opponent's next turn in many cases, is devastating. This card is incredibly strong, and if I'm completely honest, I think it's way too strong. I think it's way too good. I think this is going to go the way of the original Monty and is going to need nerfing pretty quickly, because this is a very, very strong card. Anyway, you could argue that 4-cost means you're not playing at the most perfect time, because obviously the new Monty has the advantage that you can play it early for advantage, but the new Monty doesn't pin everything deployed or added by the enemy next turn. Notice and added, which is really crucial. You cannot play around this by using things like tractor factories or mass deployment or other stuff that adds units. They all get pinned too. Yeah, this is crazy. This is really, really strong. And I really don't like it. I am a pin lover, by the way. I don't mind board control and pin, as people will know. I like playing control cards, so the fact that I'm saying I don't like this may worry you, and perhaps it should. Guess we'll find out. Right, pronunciation time. Let's hope I get this right. So this is the Fukuoka Regiment. This is another of the new Japan infantry, which comes with a drawback, but gets you incredible stats. And oh boy, does this do both. So, this gives you a 4-3 Blitz Fury infantry. I'll say it for 4. I'll say that again. For 4 credits, you get a 0 op cost 4-3 Blitz infantry with Fury. This is an unbelievably good body for its cost. But, and it's a big but, it has destruction. The enemy gains a credit slot. Not the enemy gains a credit, the enemy gains a credit slot. This is a very powerful card, played well, because it is an unbelievable threat that your opponent has to answer, because it could utterly, utterly destroy you. A 0 op cost Fury unit is always scary. Fury is always something you need to deal with, because you can exploit the life out of it if, for example, you've recently gained any, things that have effects like gain stuff when it attacks the enemy HQ or something weird like that, or a way of adding smoke screen to things, and then gaining bonuses for losing smoke screen. Not that Japan has any of the things that I'm currently talking about. In all seriousness, expect this card to see play. But the downside is big, depending on who you're playing into. Like, nobody minds being given an extra credit slot, but certain decks and ATs at the minute, particularly Ramp, love this card. Love that you play this card, because you are helping them a lot when they get rid of it. And they will get rid of it, because they have to. On the plus side, it is one of those things, though, where your opponent really doesn't want to suppress it. I don't want to play my M10 into this if I'm on front line, because I sort of don't want to take away the destruction effect. I'd rather destroy it. But at the same time, I also don't want it to have Fury. So this is a card that makes your opponent think. I love that. I really love that in the idea of just Japan in general. Having more cards that make your opponent think makes me happy. I like think-based cards. I always will. I think this is interesting. I don't know how good it's going to be, but I think it's a fascinating card, and I certainly think we're going to see it see some play. Well, hello the 4th Guards Rifles. Hello, it's another ridiculous Soviet elite. I say it's Soviet elite and it's ridiculous because all Soviet elites are inevitably ridiculous in one direction or the other. Let's find out which direction this one's ridiculous in. Is this just bicycle spokes or crazed beyond belief, or have we finally got a balanced Soviet elite? So this is a 2 operation cost, 9 cost infantry. It's 9-9. It's a lot of stats. It has blitz and guard. It's got some good bits on it. And then you read the text and realise why Soviet control adores this card, as does any late-game deck. If in your hand, reduce the cost by 1 each time the enemy draws a card. This is insane. This just goes straight into every Soviet control or late-game deck. Just plop straight away. Absolutely no regrets. Yes, it's 2 op cost, but you care a lot less because it's probably only costing you 3 credits, 2 credits, 1 credit. You might even be playing it for free, especially if you're playing into, say, Britain, who like drawing cards. And it's a 9-9. I love this card. I think this is the kind of thing that the Soviets need. It's just value on a stick. It ticks away in your hand and then you throw it down, and I love that sort of thing. I love that sort of thing where you hold something in your hand and your opponent has to respect the fact that you might be holding it, because the turn this hits the board, it will hurt. I love this card. I think it's very well designed. I don't have any problem with this at all as an elite. I think this is another very strong Soviet elite, and definitely worth keeping an eye on. Yeah, overall, I think this will see play, and it's pretty solid. Iron Victory. Some Game of Thrones Iron Price joke that I'm not going to make, because so Iron Victory is a new Sov Limited card, and this is a thing. So this is a 5-cost order that causes you to discard your entire hand and replace all of your cards with T-34 1942s that have 1 operation cost. Okay. So where to begin? I suppose obviously we'll begin with the 1942, which is the vanilla-ish T-34. It's the 5.5 Blitz tank. It's now 1 op cost, but it still costs 5. So for this to do anything good, you need to be in a position whereby you have a lot of spare credits, or a board position that can survive you firing the effect on this card, and then taking your time to actually take advantage of the T-34s which you have now gained. This is a very long walk to some T-34s. And since we're already getting T-34s and other support in the game, I really do not see how at cost this is going to be that good. Sure, you can do some very fun things with this. If you get to the late game and you just need T-34s to finish out the game, you could drop one of these and go with it. Maybe this is a one-of in a T-34 deck, just to give you that final push if you've got a bunch of stuff on the deck that buffs it. Like, I suppose if you've got a more on the deck, on the board, and then you can fire this off and wah, suddenly a huge pile of T-34s. Well, I say a huge pile, but each of them still costs you 5 credits. Now, of course, ramp is a thing in this game. We do have credit acceleration available, so there are ways that this could get used, but on the whole, I don't think this is particularly amazing. I don't think it's particularly bad either. I wait to see how much it sees play, even in decks that want to use it. This is probably very good if you want to play a Japan-Soviet self-discard list of some variety, which are out there, just as a thought. If you've got a handful of things that have positive discard effects, this could be fun, because it turns them all into, massively potent tanks that you can then do something with. But you still have to deploy them, but it's interesting. If someone's going to cook with this, several people are going to cook with this, they're probably not going to be me. This is not my style of card. But it'll be interesting to see. And it is yet more T-34 in a tank-focused expansion, so that's something. Right. It's Baron pronunciation time, so if I am remembering correctly, this is Vystrel course. I'm sure the Russian speakers who I know, like Sonny, are going to tell me how good or bad my pronunciation was. This refers to an officer training course, or at least a nickname for it, during the war. You can go Google it, if I remember correctly. Someone, again, will correct me. The historians will correct me if I'm wrong. And this is interesting, because this is a Soviet 2-cost order, and it's a standard card, which is kind of important in a minute. This is interesting, because this is a very strong effect. It's a +3/+3 for 2, but it has limitations. Firstly, it can only target friendly tank or infantry. Secondly, and this is what's intriguing to me, it's delayed. So it's cheaper because it doesn't kick in until the start of your next turn. So you play this, and your opponent has 1 turn to deal with the unit you've played it on. Then at the start of your next turn, that unit gets +3/+3. This is interesting because there are ways that you can use this. Soviets are not short of guards. And if you have a guard covering something that could then become really potent, say it's got shock, and then you give it +3/+3, that could be bonkers. And because it's a standard card, you can pop this off multiple times. I really like this. I think this is a really interesting design space. I have literally no idea whether it's good, but I certainly intend to find out. I legitimately, it's not often I look at a card and go, I legitimately will probably try and build a deck around this. I'm almost certainly going to try and build a deck around this, because this is an interesting piece of design space to me. We've not seen an awful lot of, like, delayed effects. And delayed effects, I think, are always interesting, because you can, as a designer, so a brief bear in design mode moment, because these happen, you can, as a designer, get away with a lot more if you put a clock on it. We have seen similar things with the units that start with a clock, and if they survive X turns, and we've seen it with some covert units that tick over. This is a very similar theme. We're starting to explore this idea that we can get away as designers with much, much bigger effects for much less investment, as long as we put a clock on it, so there's something someone can do about it. Granted, this is a very short clock, and you can control it. But yeah, I love this. I love the theme of this. I love the artwork of this. I think this is very cool. And I think this is a card that is fascinating. I don't know that many people are going to particularly care for this card. But I'm certainly going to play around with it, because I like interesting things. Anyway, just my thoughts. I imagine some people are going to think this card's complete bicycle spokes, and I totally understand why. Because you can play around it. You can like, you could suppress the unit, destroy the unit, find a way to remove or bounce the unit. There are lots of things you can do to counter this. But if you don't counter it, it's very potent. Okie doke. US card. This is Bocage Warfare. Bocage Warfare refers to hedgerow warfare. Go look it up, but it's a whole thing from fighting in Normandy during the Second World War. Anyway, it's the theme fits. The idea of this kind of creeping covered warfare kind of fits with what this card is doing. Again, I like the art on this. This is, again, the kind of art style that I personally enjoy. This is a cheap order. And it says, give a unit in your support line, it gets +2/+2 when it moves into the front line. This is a good frontline card. This is interesting. This is a versatile order at 1 cost. It's not massively expensive. It is a special, which it kind of needs to be. So the most direct comparison, of course, is going to be with For Freedom, which is give a unit +1/+1 and draw a card. This is a much bigger buff. But you have to have a unit that you can get it on. But 164th Infantry, bear with me here, turn 2, 164th Infantry as a frontline player, pop the 164th onto the board, drop this, push the 164th forward, because it's 0 op cost, you have a 3/3 in the front line, which then, when it dies, gives +1/+1 to another unit. Do not sleep on this card. It is probably going to see play, because it is just value. Also, if you see this in draft, you're probably taking it, because it's also cheap. 1 cost is fine for this. 1 cost for +2/+2 is good. And you have plenty of ways of getting into the front line, because you just put it on something with blitz and move on, and it's not like there's any lack there. The same thing can happen on you can turn 3 this onto any of the 1/3s, which then suddenly become 2/5s. You could put this on a late played unit that is pushing into the front line later. So if you've got a Sherman sat in the back in front line and you suddenly need to put it up to the front, you happen to have a spare credit because, you're not doing anything else with it. Suddenly that's a 6/6. Do not sleep on how effective a buff like this can be. Played well, this card could turn the tide in a lot of battles. I like this card, I like the design of this card, I like the history of this card, and I am definitely pro this card seeing a bit of play. I certainly intend to try it out in some good frontline based decks. It is definitely a frontline style card, like a mid-range frontline card that you're going to play in decks that are just constantly contesting. But it can certainly make a unit hard to shift. So yeah, expect to see this see some play. So here it is, the Sherman pinnacle, the capstone of the new Sherman archetype, I suppose, in the form of the US elite that we kind of knew was going to come at some point, that was going to be Sherman focused. This is hell on wheels. So this is a 4-cost order that says Duplicate a friendly tank. Reduce its operation cost by 2. Double its attack if it's a Sherman. Right, so obviously this card is utterly bonkers as a finisher. Let's get that out of the way. This card is insane as a finisher. This can give you a 0 op cost, 8 attack Sherman, with which you can, just from a vanilla Sherman, with which you can beat the enemy to death. It doesn't buff its defense, but still. Obviously, you can pick your target for this, and obviously you are duping the tank. Note, you're duping it, which means you have 2 of them. So if you drop this, as I understand it, on a standard 4-4 Sherman, you will have 2 8-4s with operation cost 0. That's 16 points of damage a turn for free. Good luck. So this is quite possibly bonkers. If you go down the Sherman route, you will be including this card. You will be including this card because it is basically just an auto-include in any Sherman deck. There's no way around it, it just is. However, how strong the Sherman archetype is going to be a question with this, but this is a very strong capstone for it. It's quite a funky idea, and it's definitely big and flashy, the way that I would expect a US elite in this game to be. Kind of like it, actually. Here is the 8th Marocain. So Marocain is... So first of all, this is a France card. The 8th Marocain is referring to the Moroccan... It's the Moroccan forces. So this is the... What I love about this, and there's a theme here, is the French cards are leaning into the Free French army. The kind of blending of the Free French forces with the French African army in World War II, and the Marocains were a significant part of that redirection. Anyway, I'm not going to give you a history lesson. I am going to say I love the art on this. It's very cool. And if you don't love the art on this, I'm not quite sure who... Well, you know, everyone's got different tastes, but come on, this is really cool. So this is a interesting card because it's a 5/5. It has 3 op cost. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. When you deploy another unit, your HQ gains defense equal to its operation cost. French special. Now this leads us to where France is going. And I'm just going to say it now, before we get to the other cards. France is being popped. The French cards we are seeing here make it a very appealing ally for the US 3 op cost deck archetype. And I love that. I love that for a lot of reasons. I've been arguing, as many people know, for France to be more proactive and used for some kind of fundamental archetype that it's just the ally for that isn't mill for a while now. And we've seen some more proactive French units that I've made use of in some good games, but this is really interesting because this is going down a solid direction. Also, thematically, go look up the US combining with the French. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of theme behind this too that I really, really like. But I like Marocains. I think this is going to be a card that I'm definitely going to be playing around with, because in a 3 op cost deck, of course, this means that you're just dropping things that are getting you other benefits and increasing your HQ defense in a meta where HQ defense might matter more than usual. Garrison, we're looking at you. But I love this, I really do. I think this is a fantastically thought out unit. I think it's very well costed, I think it's very good stats, it's very appealing, and he's pretty much an instant slap into the 3 op deck for me. A deck you'll probably see me playing on Thursday. Anyway, I like this, I think it's a good direction, and I'm excited to talk you through the rest of the direction of France. Okay, it's the 152nd Regiment. This is yet another France 3 op cost ally card. It really is. 1 cost, 3 op, 3/3 guard. Good stats. Cannot be deployed unless you have 6 or more credit slots. That's not going to be a big deal. You're going to be ramping to get 3 op going anyway. And it's a standard card. I love this card. I love this card. as just a good drop that can proc a bunch of the stuff you're doing and give you some delaying space if you need it. Do I think it's amazing? No. Do I think it's probably one of the first cards that starts getting cut when you get tight for space in a 3-op cost deck? Yeah, probably. But I like the design of it. I think it's kind of cool. And I think it's nice to lean that direction. I think the restriction text might need to be modged at some point to maybe be 5 credit slots. Or even 4 credit slots. I don't know. 6 feels heavy, considering you only get 3/3 on the board. But hey, there are other things you can gain and benefit from this. So we'll see. Not the strongest of the cards, but then it is a standard. I present the Free French Navy. I love this card. I want to make that very, very clear. This is another part of this. This whole direction for France, I am very pro, because it sees France being played in a proactive, kind of competitive for the front line kind of a deck, and in an archetype that it can do something really useful in. This says, it's a limited card, and it says, draw the top unit of your deck with an operation cost of 3, and your HQ gains +3 defense, for 2 credits. I love this. This is just good value. This is draw and HQ defense. And I said before, Compromise was underplayed for its basic value because it got you draw, but this is more specific because it gets you a unit, which in 3-op is something you're probably going to want. I think this is a 3-of in pretty much any France Ally 3-op deck. And I think France Ally 3-op decks are probably going to be good. I don't know how good. I don't know whether it's going to be better to go with a different ally, but I love the option. And I love the idea that the Free French Navy is ferrying units around to where they need. Again, just, I'm not going to give you a history lesson. Go look it up. It's fun. But this is another very solid card. This is quite strong, and again, it is giving you HQ defense. The 3-op cost gaining 3, like HQ defense on a regular basis between this and the Marocains is pretty good. On the whole, I think it's very solid. I think this is a card that definitely will see play. If you do want to see it see play, probably, come check me out for a while, because I'm probably going to be playing the life out of a US-France 3-op cost deck, because I just like the idea. But anyway, yeah, I like this card. I think it's pretty solid, and I think it shows that France has had a very holistic 3 cards. They are not subtle with these 3 cards, going in one specific direction and saying this is what it's designed for. I like it. Okie doke, this is the 49th Infantry Regiment from Italy. This is a standard card. I like to see more standard cards being added for Allied nations, just in general. I think good standard cards are what make Allied nations interesting. But anyway, let's have a look. This is a 3-cost, 1-op cost infantry that's a 4/2 with Blitz, so just on the face of it, it's okay. It's a decent, but it's a bit fragile, with only 2 defense, but it's still trades well because of the sheer value of its attack. Shoving this into the front line on turn 4 doesn't suck. We've all loved being able to put 4/4s into the front line on turn 4, which is kind of the big kind of thing you'd aim for after Rangers was around for a while. 4/4 or 3/4 or 4/3 is kind of, for me, the expected value that you want to be putting into frontline in a mid-range deck on turn 4. On credit 4, I should say, but especially with credit acceleration around. But yeah, on credit 4, this you are looking for that. This is undervalue, okay? But it is a standard card, so being a bit undervalue isn't a bad thing. It's not hugely undervalue. It's got the important stat, which is the attack, because it makes it a pain to trade. It also, however, has deployment. Your HQ gets +4 defense if you control another unit with 4 or more attack. So this plays into the 4 or more attack thing, which also presumably helps shift Italy into an ally that Germany wants, which is always something I like to see, because Italy, Germany, and warfare, the Second World War, and the whole history's there. I don't know. The issue I have is that, generally speaking, Allied nation cards need to be very, very good, because you're only getting 12 of them. And is this good enough for constructed? I don't know. I really don't, because it's going to depend on how good this forum war attack thing is and how much you actually want Italy as an ally. And I'm not sure you do, because I think a lot of the time you're going to want the US as an ally, because you're going to want ramp, because you're wanting to play expensive units. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. That said, I will also say this is a very good draft card. This is not a bad card to see in draft. This definitely ups Italy's stock in draft as an ally, because you don't mind seeing this. As I say, it is under-defensed, it's understated, but only slightly, for return 4 play into the front line. And it's an awkward trade because it does a lot of damage, which means to trade it out, you're going to have to lose something. Now, of course, there are easy ways to trade this out. This trades out. You can get a very favourable trade on this with, for example, 15th Cavalry, which is where the problem comes in. There are quite a lot of pop units that you can drop down and get a very favourable trade on this with, but it can be awkward. You're not always going to be able to get a favourable trade with, for example, popping 164th Infantry and then getting a buff on something. That buff might not be enough to make that something survive, given that this has 4 attack. But again, we'd have to see it in play to know this, and I don't know that we'll see a lot of it in play. I think some Italian ally decks will probably try it. I just don't know whether it's going to stick. I don't know whether it's good enough to value as an allied. If this was a main nation card, it might be better. As an allied nation card, I think it's just too fragile. Also, this is so hittable things with desperate measures. You throw a bunch of these out and your opponent's, Japan's just like, nah, I'll just blow it up and move on. So, don't know. A little bit lukewarm on this, but we shall see. And I do like to see more Allied Nation cards dropping, so let's find out. But overall, I'm not sure the 49th is going to be lighting anyone's fire with regards to Italy as an ally, which is a shame, really, because it's a nice idea. This is the 1st Grenadier Regiment. So this is a really interesting card. So I want to get a couple of things out of the way. This Polish card, this is a special, is an exile card. And first and foremost, I believe this is exile France. This is exile to an allied nation. That will be relevant in a moment. So, 1st Grenadiers is so much fun. This card is so scary. So, it's incredibly expensive at 6 cost. At 3/6 as a guard, it's kind of okay. But good grief, the text on this thing. Enemy units that damage anything but this unit are destroyed. So, bluntly, this is bonkers. Bomber hits your HQ, blows up. Artillery hits your HQ, blows up. Commandos deck starts pinging things everywhere. Almost certainly all of its commandos die. Something tries to trade into the front line and explodes. You must answer this card when it hits the board. Otherwise it will utterly destroy your board position. And it's got 6 defense. I love this card. This card is utterly insane. I did say, though, I would point out that the France Exile is relevant, and it is relevant because this card also has 3 op cost. And France is the 3 op cost ally from this expansion. This card's really good. Do not sleep on how much fun you can probably have with this card. I'm very much looking forward to playing with this. I don't know that eventually it might not see a little bit of a nerf, because it could be very scary. It's definitely on the must-answer category, and is yet another really good card for Poland in this expansion. Okay, so that is it. That is the last part of my reviews of the cards spoiled ahead of Blood and Iron, which is releasing on the 28th of November. I have covered all 87 cards in as much detail as I'm able to do. As always, I hope it's been useful / enjoyable. Please like, follow, subscribe, all of that stuff. Donate or support if you can in any way that you're able to. And of course, keep your eyes out, join my Discord and stuff. You will be able to join me probably on Thursday if you happen to be around at the time for some pack openings and some gameplay. Overall, looking exciting. Thanks very much for your time. As always, take care of yourselves, be good human beings, and I will catch you next time.